Left 4 Dead's biggest controversy wasn't a bug, or balance issues, or anything like that. It was the release of another sequel. And not because the sequel was bad or anything, but because of how fast it happened. Less than a year after the first game came out, Valve announced Left 4 Dead 2, and that immediately threw people off. Because at the time, the original game was still huge. People were playing it every day, servers were full, mods were just starting to take off. From the player's point of view, Left 4 Dead didn't feel old. It felt like it was just getting started. Most fans weren't expecting a sequel anytime soon. Valve wasn't known for rushing games, and players assumed Left 4 Dead was going to be supported for years, with updates and expansions. So when the sequel was announced, that quickly, it didn't feel exciting for the people. It felt confusing. And that confusion is what slowly turned into backlash, and eventually one of the biggest controversies Valve had ever to deal with. So once Valve announced Left 4 Dead 2, the reaction was weird. Not full on anger right away, more like confusion mixed with disappointment. Because the first thing everyone noticed was the timing. The original Left 4 Dead hadn't ever been out a year yet. People were still playing it constantly, and it didn't feel like a game that needed to be replaced. So a lot of players started asking questions. Why is this a sequel already? The stuff Valve showed actually looked pretty cool. There were new survivors, new locations, melee weapons, and new special infected that changed how fighting works. But that just made things worse. To most fans, it didn't look like a completely new game. It looked like the same game, just improved. And back then, improvements usually came with updates or expansions, not a brand new, fully priced release. So people started feeling like they were being asked to buy the same game again. But then came the bigger worry. Players were scared Valve was going to move on and forget about the first game. Once a sequel came out, the old version usually died, and nobody wanted to be stuck playing the dead Left 4 Dead. That fear spread fast. Pretty quickly, the backlash got loud. Steam groups popped up, calling for a boycott of the sequel. Tens of thousands of players joined. Forums were full of posts accusing Valve of rushing the game just to make money. And almost every argument boiled down to one sentence: this should have been a DLC. Even players who thought the sequel looked fun weren't happy with how fast it was happening. Valve eventually responded and tried to calm things down. They promised they were not abandoning the first game, said updates would continue, and that content would be shared between both games. That helped a little, but by that point, a lot of trust had already been lost. Then, the game got released. And honestly, it was good. It played smoother. The new infected made fights much more interesting. Melee weapons added a lot, and overall, it just felt more polished than the original. A lot of players who said they wouldn't buy it ended up buying it anyway, of course. And most of them stayed. In the end, the boycott didn't really work. Left 4 Dead became the main game everyone played, while the original slowly faded into the background. But the controversy never really disappeared. Because it was never about the game being bad. It was about the timing, and how fast Valve would move on. After the backlash died down, and Left 4 Dead 2 had been out for a while, things slowly settled. Most players just accepted that this was the main game now. Valve didn't completely forget about the original Left 4 Dead. Instead, they started to bring stuff over. Campaigns from the first game were added into Left 4 Dead 2, which helped a lot, because it meant nothing was truly left behind. That move basically merged the communities instead of splitting them. Over time, people stopped arguing about whether the sequel should have existed and started focusing on what the game was more fun to actually play. And for most people, the answer was simple. Left 4 Dead 2 just felt better. It had more weapons, more enemy variety, and more ways for things to go wrong in the best way possible. So when people wanted to play Left 4 Dead, they almost always booted up the sequel. The original didn't disappear, but it definitely became the old version. But here's the interesting part. Valve never rushed another sequel after that. No Left 4 Dead 3, as we all know. No yearly releases, and no constant follow-ups. If anything, it feels like Valve learned from the backlash and decided not to push the series any further. Years later, fans look back at the controversy in a calmer way. Some people still say the sequel should have been a DLC. Others say the sequel was worth it. because it improved everything. Both sides still exist, even to this day. But the reason this whole thing gets talked about isn't because Left 4 Dead 2 was bad. It's because it was one of the first times fans felt like Valve moved on too fast. And that moment stuck with players. Looking back now, the whole Left 4 Dead controversy feels kinda weird. Because on one hand, yeah, the backlash made sense. The sequel came out way too fast, people felt rushed, and it really didn't feel like the first game had run its course yet. That frustration was real, but on the other hand, Left 4 Dead 2 ended being the version most people loved and stuck with. So it's one of those situations where both sides were kind of right. What really made this whole thing stick wasn't the game itself, it was the moment. After this, Valve got way quieter with sequels, way more careful. And honestly, you can still feel that today. So yeah, Left 4 Dead 2's biggest controversy wasn't about bugs or balance, or bad game design. It was about timing, and how even a great game can cause problems if it shows up too soon. Alright, I hope, of course, you enjoyed my little rambling video, and I hope I see you in the next video. Goodbye!